The imperial forces of the dynasty attacked and occupied Chang'an, and the scene of devastation was beyond words. The official histories recorded it only briefly. Fortunately, there was someone who had personally witnessed it and carefully wrote down what he saw. Yet these records lay buried in the dust of history for 1,000 years, until the 26th year of Emperor Huang Chao of the Qing dynasty, when the world rediscovered them. That year, Huaxia was mired in chaos. The Taoist priest Wang Yuanlu, seeking to escape the turmoil of war, arrived at the mysterious Mogao grottos in Dunhuang. One day, while sweeping the storeroom, he discovered a hidden chamber behind a wall. Inside the chamber were treasures and more than 10,000 ancient manuscripts. Wang immediately selected a few scrolls and brought them to the local yamen. Scholars who glanced through them were astonished, for these manuscripts contained priceless materials spanning from the former Qin to the northern Song dynasties. They were instantly recognized as being of extraordinary research value, and a proposal was made to transfer them to the provincial capital for safekeeping. But the county magistrate, calculating the high cost of transport, ordered Wang Yuanlu to seal the chamber and pretend it had never been found. This negligence could not be entirely blamed on the magistrate, for in that same year, the Eight-Nation Alliance invaded. The imperial court could barely safeguard its own treasures, let alone protect ancient texts stored thousands of miles away. Only Wang began secretly smuggling the manuscripts out and selling them to foreigners. The British-Hungarian explorer Aurel Stein purchased 5 large crates and 24 boxes for 40 silver ingots. The Frenchman Paul Pelliot exchanged 500 tales for 6,000 manuscripts. From that moment, a vast trove of precious documents drifted abroad, leaving their original homeland in irretrievable sorrow. Time passed quickly, and by 1920, the great master of Chinese studies, Wang Guowei, while reading a Japanese transcription of Dunhuang manuscripts, suddenly paused at the line, "The inner melody is embroidered brilliance, the horizon trodden in search of ancient palaces." He was shocked. Could this be the long-lost Qin Fu Yin that had vanished for 1,000 years? What kind of poem was Qin Fu Yin? Why could it shake Wang Guowei so profoundly, and how had it been lost for so long? In this account, we will delve into the story of Qin Fu Yin. First, let us explore its extraordinary background. The poem was composed during a turbulent era, in the first year of Zhonghe under Emperor Xizong of Tang. At that time, the rebellion of Huang Chao erupted. The author was a Confucian scholar who had come to Chang'an to sit for the imperial examination. But when Huang Chao's forces stormed the city, he was trapped inside. In the midst of chaos, he did not choose to flee, perhaps because escape was impossible. With his brush, he recorded the horrors within and outside Chang'an's walls, especially the suffering of innocent civilians. Among them, the women unarmed and defenseless were the most tragic victims. Some perished amid screams, while others endured a lifetime of humiliation. The author poured everything he had seen into a long poem of 1,666 characters, the very Qin Fu Yin. Its raw and truthful portrayal caused a great stir. Because its content was too direct, the author faced immense pressure. He spent his own money to buy back copies and burned them himself. Even on his deathbed, he left a will instructing his descendants never to circulate it. Yet one line of verse survived by chance, for it had been copied into another book, Bimeng Suoyan. That line was, "The inner melody is embroidered brilliance, the horizon trodden in search of ancient palaces." This single verse became the key that unlocked Qin Fu Yin, piercing through 1,000 years of dust and allowing later generations to glimpse a fragment of history. Thanks to this transmitted line, Wang Guowei's heart was shaken when he read it, and Qin Fu Yin was revived, revealing a hidden corner of the past. In Qin Fu Yin, the author wrote in the opening section, "Zhonghe, year of Guimo, 3rd month of spring, Luoyang, flowers outside the city are like snow." As we rode past Luoyang, we saw willows swaying outside the city walls like white snow, but along the road there was not a single soul, the silence as if forgotten. Suddenly, by the roadside, a woman whose beauty was like a flower stood with a face heavy with sorrow. Out of concern, I approached and asked where she had come from. The woman hesitated, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, and choked out her reply. "I am but a weak woman, adrift in a world of war and chaos. Wandering alone, I have drifted to this place. You might not believe it, but I escaped from Chang'an when Huang Chao's forces captured it." Then she begged to tell her story. That woman was the central figure of Qin Fu Yin Qin Fu. She slowly recounted her experience. She remembered that on the 5th day of the 12th month of the previous year, she had risen lazily, not bothering to comb her hair, leaning against a carved railing, teaching the parrot in its cage to mimic human speech. Through her words, it was clear she had come from a wealthy background and lived in ease, but that tranquility was quickly shattered. She recalled that on that day, dust clouds suddenly billowed outside the city walls. The thunder of war drums shook the heavens, and the Tang troops marched eastward in full formation to meet the enemy. She stood bewildered, gazing out into the street, while her neighbors ran out in panic to inquire. Soon, terrible news spread. The rebel army of Huang Chao had pressed hard upon Chang'an, and the situation at Tong Pass was perilous. Some still believed there was no cause for fear, for Chang'an was the capital of the great Tang, surely impregnable. But at that very moment, her father brought home devastating news: the emperor had fled the city, and Chang'an was on the brink of disaster. When the family was still anxiously discussing and worrying, the white flags of Huang Chao's army surged into Chang'an like a tidal wave. The city immediately descended into chaos, with people screaming as they searched for their loved ones. The old and the young, terrified, scrambled for places to hide, while the rebel army's shouts shook the heavens. The streets were filled with wailing and sorrow. She remembered the sight of smoke and flames rising endlessly, the imperial palace blazing fiercely, the streets running red with blood streaming past the houses like rivers. Cries of despair echoed in every direction. Wealthy families, desperate to save their lives, offered their songstresses to the rebels, while the poor abandoned their newborns and young daughters. Qin Fu lamented, "The sun's wheel sinks in the west, its cold light pale. Heaven's emperor speaks no words, silent and still." If heaven truly had eyes and saw this purgatory, why would it remain mute and indifferent? To be fair, according to the old book of Tang, when Huang Chao first entered Chang'an, military discipline was still strict. They did not harm the common people and even proclaimed that their uprising was to save the populace. At first, the city's residents felt reassured, believing they would not be dragged into disaster. But only a few days later, Huang Chao's troops lost control, and even Huang Chao himself was powerless. According to the new book of Tang, Huang Chao's rebels burned, looted, and slaughtered everywhere, killing officials and members of the imperial clan without mercy, leaving no room for compassion. This scene was vividly portrayed in the poet's verses. He wrote, "In the eastern neighborhood, a girl with brows painted like willow leaves, her beauty enough to topple kingdoms, knows not her own worth. She sang long songs atop the splendid chariot of Yongde, but when she turned back toward her hometown, tears stained her face as she softly hummed a lament." The lines tell of a beauty from Chengdu who was forced onto the rebels' cart. Though alive, when she later met her husband again, shame silenced her. She could only let her tears flow, unable to face him. Likewise, the poet described a maiden like a celestial fairy, once fond of adorning herself and dreaming of the future. But when the chaos stormed the city, she was violated by the soldiers. Though she resisted desperately, in the end she perished in hatred, her fragrance gone, her jade shattered. Afterward, he continued, "In the southern quarter dwelt a maiden whose name is forgotten. Yesterday she was a bride, today she is newly widowed. A newlywed bride from the southern part of Chang'an, married only the day before, was cruelly butchered by the rebels. Her grieving family embraced her corpse, and together leapt into a well to end their lives. In the north of the city, a young wife, faced with rebels breaking down her door, panicked and climbed to the roof to escape. but the rebels set her house ablaze. At last, she was consumed by the flames, reduced to ashes. The final woman in the poem was a concubine who lacked the courage to die with honor. She dressed neatly, forced a smile, and followed a rebel soldier away. From then on, she severed all ties with her kin and entered 3 years of terror. She lived amid chaos, enduring countless nights of fear, and was even forced to eat human flesh. Among Huang Chao's troops, the rebels spoke with heavy regional accents, wore ragged clothing, and looked filthy all day. They often carved characters into their faces to boast of their exploits. The rebel generals were uncultured and behaved bizarrely. They cut their hair short but adorned themselves with luxurious hairpins to display a false sense of nobility. At night, they were so slothful that they did not even remove their outer garments, let alone bathe, but simply wrapped themselves in blankets and collapsed to sleep. Those whom Huang Chao appointed as the 3 dukes knew nothing of governance and did not even wear the golden feathered belts that symbolized their rank. They merely appeared at court in the morning to feign attendance, then went out to slaughter, drink wine, and make merry, bringing the administration to utter ruin. The days of chaos dragged on endlessly, until one day uplifting news spread. The Tang imperial army had recaptured the outpost of Jishui on the outskirts of Chang'an. Jishui was not far from the capital. One could go in the morning and return by evening. When this news arrived, the senior and junior officials were filled with worry, while the younger soldiers tried to reassure one another. Huang Chao's troops drooped in despair. Even brothers within the court hugged their saddles and wept together. Everyone whispered of fleeing Chang'an. We women, who had been coerced into submission, felt our hearts surge with hope upon hearing this news. We believed the rebels' end was near and our suffering would soon cease. Yet within days, the rebels began their noisy celebrations again. They had defeated the vanguard sent to suppress them. The poem did not describe that battle in detail, perhaps out of deference to the Tang dynasty, but according to the historical records, in the first year of Zhonghe, the Tang court finally gathered military governors from all regions to form an allied force to attack Huang Chao. Upon hearing this, Huang Chao hastily withdrew from Chang'an. However, those military governors were themselves warlords entrenched in their territories. Compared to Huang Chao's rebels, their troops were even more rapacious and cruel. When the Tang army entered the city, they immediately began looting and raping the citizens of Chang'an. Even some local ruffians disguised themselves as Tang soldiers to seize the opportunity to plunder. Alas, for the people of Chang'an, having just escaped the dragon's jaws, they fell into the tiger's den. The streets were overrun with pillaging soldiers and snarling stray dogs. The chaos was indescribable. Meanwhile, Huang Chao's forces had not gone far. Taking advantage of the allied troops' indulgence in revelry, they suddenly launched a counterattack, killing many Tang generals. The Tang soldiers, reluctant to abandon their stolen goods, were cut down in great numbers by Huang Chao's rebels. Of every 10 men, 9 met a tragic death. These details will be discussed thoroughly later in the section, The Death of Huang Chao, but for now, only a general understanding is needed. When the Tang vanguard entered the city and Huang Chao's troops retreated, the citizens of Chang'an, burning with hatred, hurled stones at the fleeing rebels and even gathered arrows from within the city to hand to the Tang soldiers. However, when Huang Chao's forces attacked Chang'an for the second time, they unleashed a merciless vengeance upon the populace. Blood flowed like rivers throughout Chang'an, and corpses littered every corner. Huang Chao's army called this massacre a city cleansing. Not long after, the Tang army launched their own second assault on Chang'an. This time, they changed their strategy surrounding the city, cutting off supplies and attempting to starve Huang Chao into surrender. But this tactic not only tormented Huang Chao's soldiers, it also brought terrible suffering upon the innocent civilians trapped inside. The poem says, "On 4 sides, endless evils surround, a single measure of gold for a single measure of grain," meaning the city was besieged on all sides, and food prices skyrocketed. 1 dough of rice was costlier than gold. In Huang Chao's camp, They may have resorted to eating human flesh, while in the blacksmith's quarters they at least had bark to stave off hunger. But the people of Chang'an could do nothing but watch themselves starve, their bodies piling in the ditches. According to the Zizi Tongjian, ordinary soldiers in Huang Chao's army, to fill their stomachs, captured citizens and sold them to the Tang troops, pricing them according to whether they were fat or thin. The once flourishing capital of the great Tang now stood in utter misery. The poem also says, "What remains now of bustling Chang'an, wild grass and wheat grow in empty markets and streets, almond blossoms in the pleasure gardens are cut down, and the jadehook willows are all chopped away." In his eyes, Chang'an had become desolation. Markets and streets were overrun with weeds and green stalks, the flowers and plants of the apricot orchards had been destroyed, and even the willows with jade-like branches had been cut down. Luxurious mansions were gone. The palace grounds were overrun with foxes and hares, and before the once splendid pavilions, wild grass grew thick. The former splendor was buried, only bleak ruin remained. Rich storehouses turned to embroidered ashes, at the horizon noble corpses trampled underfoot. The splendid imperial palace had become dust, and on the distant skyline, the crushed bodies of nobles still remained. The entire city of Chang'an held scarcely a single familiar trace. Here, the narration in Qin Fu Yin suddenly shifts. He says that one morning he left the city through the eastern gate. But why could he leave so easily? What exactly had happened in Chang'an by then? This abrupt change of scene seems to conceal some crucial detail. Some scholars believe this was the moment when the Tang army successfully retook Chang'an. Because Qin Fu Yin had once sought refuge under Huang Chao's forces when they occupied the city, serving as a Tang inspector, he was forced to flee. There is a historical anecdote connected to this. After the Tang recaptured Chang'an, Emperor Zizong was escorted back to the capital. Facing the noble ladies who had been taken by Huang Chao's soldiers, Emperor Shizong coldly rebuked them. "You, the daughters of great houses who have enjoyed imperial favor for years, how could you follow the rebels?" Among them, a leading woman stood unyielding and replied, "The court commanded 1,000,000 soldiers, yet was frightened into fleeing to Bashu." "How can your majesty reproach us, weak women? What did your ministers and generals accomplish?" Emperor Xizong was silenced by her words and finally ordered all those women to be executed. On their way to the execution ground, the people of Chang'an crowded around, offering them fine wine. Most of the women drank themselves drunk, but the leading woman alone did not drink or weep. She walked calmly to her death. Had Qin Fu not fled, she might have been among them. Returning to the thread of the poem, Qin Fu begins her flight. Along the way, what scenes did she witness? The world outside was desolate, like barren wasteland. Roads once bustling with life now lay empty. The lively welcomes and farewells of the past had vanished. The grand avenue was choked with thorns, making every step harder. She saw places where tens of thousands had once lived, now utterly deserted, as if heaven and earth had sunk into a silent apocalypse. Qin Fu Yin recounted that she wandered aimlessly, her heart lost, feeling as though no light remained ahead. On the road, she passed a shrine, stepped inside, and addressed the golden heaven god. "Today the world is like hell, and living beings suffer. You are a god, how can you remain indifferent and do nothing?" Unexpectedly, the golden heaven god spoke in reply. His face was full of sorrow as he lamented, "Do not blame me any longer. I too have suffered harm." Since Huang Chao's invasion, the people within the passes have been scattered. The horrors inside the city are only the tip of the iceberg. Outside, too, is a human purgatory. People, desperate to survive, no longer have the mind to offer sacrifices to me. Without incense, I have lost my divine power. The sacred water on my altar no longer holds efficacy, and the ghostly soldiers of my temple do not heed my commands. Though I am a god, I cannot save living beings. I am truly ashamed of my divine office. Very well, I am powerless and will retreat into the deep mountains, never to reveal myself again. Hearing the immortals lament, Qin Fu felt a sense of relief. Even the deities had lost their divine powers and could no longer command the spirits of the underworld. Ghosts and demons now roamed the mortal realm unchecked, wreaking havoc on all living beings. She could not help but sigh, for the realm of the immortals was suffering disaster, no different from the Tang Empire itself. The author put these words in Qin Fu's mouth. The deity is wandering in the mountains to escape calamity. How can one blame the Eastern lords for their negligence? These words seem to carry a subtle criticism of Emperor Tang Xizong. If even the gods had to flee into the mountains to hide, how could anyone reproach the Tang generals and military governors for failing to rescue the people? Qin Fu continued, saying that if she went straight eastward, past Tong Pass, a place famed for its difficulty in resisting invaders, and entered Guo Prefecture, one morning she would meet an old man. His face was clouded with sorrow as he crouched among the reeds. Curious, Qin Fu approached and asked, "Elder, who are you, and why are you hiding here?" The old man spoke through his tears, slowly recounting his tragedy. He said, "I once lived near the eastern capital Luoyang. My family owned fields and grain, and we lived in comfort. We possessed as many as 200 plots of farmland, paying household taxes of up to 30 million coins each year, with our granaries full of grain. But one day, the rebel Huang Chao's army came. Half of my property was plundered. Though half remained, I struggled to survive. Not long after, the Tang army also arrived. They waved their tiger banners, stormed into my home like a whirlwind scattering clouds, and seized the remaining grain." The old man's voice was filled with despair and grief. His wealth was gone, his family scattered, and now he was old and alone. Yet he was not the only sufferer. There were tens of thousands in the mountains in the same plight. By day, they foraged for roots and wild fruits to stave off hunger. By night, they curled up among the reeds to sleep. Hearing these words of misery, Qin Fu's heart ached deeply, and tears poured down like rain for an entire day without pause. She herself could not hold back her tears. She had thought that by fleeing Chang'an and crossing Tong Pass, she could escape disaster and find refuge. Who would have imagined that upon reaching Luoyang, the scene was the same, scarcely any different? The world was vast, yet nowhere offered shelter. In despair, she asked herself, "In this world, where can I ever find a place to settle?" Qin Fu wiped her tears and recounted that afterwards she met a traveler from Jingling. This man spoke about conditions in Jiangnan. He said that since Huang Chao had invaded the Central Plains, Jiangnan had remained at peace. In Jiangnan, bandits had been wiped out. Officials governed the people as if caring for their own children. The city walls were strong as metal and stone, the tax revenues plentiful as clouds, and reinforcements abundant. Hearing this, Qin Fu felt a spark of hope. She swore that even if she were to die, she would make her way to Jiangnan, preferring to leave her body there. She mocked herself, saying, "Look at me, once born and raised in the capital, now envious even of the spirits in Jiangnan." She advised, "Why not, like me, board a boat and head eastward to Jiangnan to seek a livelihood? Perhaps you might still find a path to survival. May you lift your oars to the east, entrust your life to the eastern journey, and sing a long song to reveal your noble spirit." Here, the Qin Fu ballad draws to a close. Not one character in the poem escapes suffering. In the face of such great turmoil, the helplessness and despair expressed by Qin Fu tear at the heart. She lamented again, "The deity is wandering in the mountains to escape calamity. How can one blame the Eastern lords for their negligence? When even divine beings could not save the people, how could one reproach the Tang generals for failing to rescue them?" The old man, through his wretched experience, further exposed the misery of the common people. Entering my gate and dismounting as if in a violent storm, swearing oaths yet stealing like rolling earth. The rebels seized half his property, and then the Tang soldiers came to strip away the rest. Such helplessness and despair were surely the most profound feelings of the common folk in those chaotic times. They did not know whom to trust or to whom to pray. Consider if you lived in those days, when war consumed everything. In this installment, we revisit the great catastrophe that reshaped the course of Chinese history, the rebellion of Huang Chao. How did Huang Chao's uprising ignite? Let us begin with the white gold of the Tang dynasty. Today we are accustomed to calling petroleum black gold. In the Tang dynasty, what was known as white gold, it was salt. If petroleum is the pillar of spirit, salt is the sustenance of the body. No one can live without salt. The history of salt, stretching back more than 2,700 years to the spring and autumn period, was already deeply understood. Guanzong, the chancellor of the state of Qi, once said to Duke Huan of Qi, 10 men eat salt. 100 men eat salt. If the court monopolizes salt and raises the price by 2 coins per shang, then in 1 year the revenue will increase greatly. From then on, the government monopoly on salt and iron began, becoming a vital tool for boosting dynastic finances. By the reign of Emperor Wu of Han, it was through this very blade that he resolved a financial crisis and built his imperial supremacy. Yet when the Tang dynasty was newly founded, Emperor Taizong Li Shimin chose a different path. He declared that salt and iron would not be monopolized, proposing that mountains, forests, rivers and lakes be shared with the people, and the great rivers and waterways be jointly owned by the emperor and the populace. But after the outbreak of the Anlushan Shi-Siming rebellion, the Tang dynasty fell into severe economic crisis to the point where even official stipends could barely be paid. In desperation, the Tang court revived the monopoly on salt known as the measured salt system. At first, the production, transport, and sale of salt were entirely controlled by the imperial court. Producers sold to the government at 10 coins per due, and the government resold it to the people at 110 coins. But because the court had to handle collection, transport, and sales, the bureaucracy swelled. To streamline operations, Salt Commissioner Liu Yan reformed the system, changing official transport and sales into merchant transport and sales. The court granted salt merchants unified control over shipping and trade. From then on, middlemen emerged. Over time, however, the Tang bureaucracy grew increasingly corrupt, and the salt merchants slipped out of control, arbitrarily raising prices, ultimately pushing the cost up to 310 coins per due. The salt merchants reaped enormous profits, while the court's revenue was meager. As Baiju described in Yanshang Fu, salt merchants grew wealthy, and women who married them lived in comfort and affluence. But the burden was borne by the poor. The soaring price of salt plunged the common people into hardship. Some were even forced to eat foods they would normally avoid. Smugglers quickly saw the profit gap and rose to prominence. Smuggled salt was cheaper than government salt and was immediately welcomed by the people, but it was harshly suppressed by the court. Records state that anyone selling more than 1 dan of illegal salt would be executed, and neighbors who failed to report it would also be punished. Driven to desperation, salt smugglers armed themselves, gathered local heroes, formed gangs, and stepped onto the path of armed salt trafficking. By the 5 Dynasties and 10 Kingdoms period, several outstanding figures had emerged from the ranks of salt bandits. At the end of the Yuan dynasty, Zhang Xicheng, who vied for supremacy against Zhu Yuanzhang, was a classic salt bandit. The central figure of this account, Huang Chao, was different. He was born into a prominent family of salt smugglers. Since his grandfather's generation, the Huang family had been in the salt trade, and by Huang Chao's time, the Wang family had already accumulated vast wealth and wielded significant local influence. Normally, Huang Chao should have inherited the family business and peacefully continued as a salt merchant, but the elder Huang had other plans. They hoped Huang Chao would achieve scholarly honors through the imperial examinations, enter government service, and perhaps, as a high official, win exclusive salt trading privileges for the family. In this way, they could transform from merchants into officials and elevate their status to a higher tier. Unfortunately, Huang Chao repeatedly failed the exams. After the final attempt, when the results were posted and he found no trace of his name, he was furious and resolved never to sit for the examinations again. Leaving Chang'an in anger, he penned his famous poem, "Wait until autumn comes in the 8th month of September. After my flowers bloom, all other blossoms are slain. The scent rises to the heavens, shaking Chang'an, the whole city will wear golden armor." The scholarly road to Chang'an was closed, and Huang Chao thought perhaps only a path of slaughter could open a way. In his heart, he swore that one day he would return to Chang'an in blood. That decision would lie dormant for nearly 30 years. As Huang Chao approached 50, he realized that if he did not act now, age would overtake him. At that very moment, the final opportunity appeared. In 873, the 14th year of Shantong, Emperor Yizong of Tang, Li Kui, passed away. The 12-year-old Li Xuan ascended the throne amid wailing and inherited chaos. Li Xuan's fortune was grim soon after his enthronement. The Guangdong region suffered persistent drought. From Bozhou to the sea, not a single grain was harvested all autumn. The people survived on barley husks for rice and pagoda tree leaves as vegetables. They could not fill their stomachs and were forced to sell wives and children to pay taxes. When the young emperor Li Xuan learned of this, he immediately ordered a tax exemption for the Guangdong populace to lighten their burden. Local officials received the decree, outwardly prostrated in gratitude for imperial grace, but then gleefully continued collecting taxes. The emperor forbade tax collection, yet they collected on behalf of the court, pocketing the taxes wrung from desperate peasants who had sold their children. Driven to despair, the starving masses rose in rebellion, and uprisings flared everywhere. From east of Tongguan, revolts broke out without cease. Among them, the most powerful force was not yet Huang Chao, but Wang Shanzi. Wang Shanzi, leader of the Yanbang in Fuzhou, came from a wealthy salt merchant family and quickly assembled a formidable rebel army. Yet, after rising up, Wang Xianzi faced a challenge: how to expand his ranks quickly in a land of famine. Though uprisings were rare, there were some tried and true methods for recruitment. Wang Xianzi issued a rallying slogan: equal distribution of land and grain, that is, all the wealth under heaven would be shared equally. To the starving and freezing populace, this promise was irresistible. They flocked to Wang Xianzi's camp. He proclaimed himself Great General of Heaven's Equal Distribution, Tianbu Pingjun Dajiangjun, and his rebel army became known as the Grass Troops, Taojun. Although Wang Xianzi's grass troops grew daily in number, he understood that mere numbers were not enough. He urgently needed a decisive victory to solidify his position. By the 15th year of Xiantong, Wang Xianzi led the grass troops to attack Fuzhou and Caozhou. The court hastily dispatched the Tianping military governor, Xie Chong, to meet them in battle. But Wang Xianzi's forces were strong and well prepared. Xie Chong's army could not withstand them and suffered a crushing defeat. Huzhou and Caozhou fell one after the other. This victory thundered across the land, shaking all the rebels to action. The Tang imperial forces proved feeble. News of Wang Xianzi's triumph over the court spread quickly, inspiring other uprisings to rally under his banner. The grass troops swelled rapidly to tens of thousands. However, among the people near Caozhou there was doubt. Was Wang Xianzi's capture of Caozhou truly as the rumors claimed? For in this place a children's rhyme had long circulated: a golden-colored toad dazzles the slave's eyes, overturn Caozhou and the world overturns. This song seemed to foretell Caozhou's rebellion and a great upheaval across the realm. Students of history all know that uprisings and the downfall of dynasties in ancient times were often entwined with mysterious prophecies. Because such rhymes were short, easy to remember, and filled with mystique, they spread widely and became effective tools for stirring rebellion. Where exactly the phrase "golden toad" came from can no longer be verified, but the one who benefited most was Huang Chao. At this time, Huang Chao saw the Tang court overrun with corrupt officials, the people in misery, Huaxia decaying, and uprisings erupting everywhere. He suddenly recalled his old vow: "One day I will return to Chang'an to kill. My heavenly fragrance will pierce Chang'an, and the whole city shall wear golden armor." Huang Chao resolved to act. He gathered his followers and declared boldly, "Have you heard the prophecy of the golden toad? Is not gold itself Huang? And is the golden toad not me, Huang Chao?" With this prophecy as a talisman, Huang Chao easily raised the banner of righteous revolt. The Huang family had traded salt for 3 generations and had accumulated considerable influence. Moreover, Huang Chao himself was generous, chivalrous, and held high local prestige, so his forces quickly swelled. Yet at this stage, Huang Chao did not rush to act independently. The realm was full of competing powers, and many small rebel bands sought to merge with larger armies to survive. Wang Xianzi and Huang Chao were both from salt trading backgrounds and had cooperated in the past. Thus, when Huang Chao brought his troops to pledge allegiance, Wang Xianzi was overjoyed and exclaimed, "Brother, with your joining us, our grass army is like a tiger growing wings. From now on, we will roam the world together." Wang Xianzi immediately appointed Huang Chao as deputy commander of the grass army. From this moment, Huang Chao officially stepped onto the stage of history. Seeing the grass army's growing strength, the Tang court could not restrain itself. It urgently ordered the military governors of Huainan, Zhongwu, Xuanwu, Yicheng, Tianping, and Wu to combine into a special leadership group to coordinate suppression. At this critical moment, the court called on all regional forces to unite, set aside self-interest, and suppress the rebels. But Wang Xianzi did not remain idle. Together with Huang Chao, he led the grass army to attack Yizhou, territory of the Pinglu army. Facing the rebels, Pinglu military governor Song Wei immediately memorialized the court, requesting permission to march against the rebels and asking for 5,000 troops in reinforcement. The court, left with no choice, not only agreed but also appointed Song Wei as commissioner for all circuits to suppress the Tao rebels, equivalent to overall commander to whom all armies must submit. Under Song Wei's unified command, the imperial forces quickly assembled, preparing for a decisive battle with the grass army. Yet although the grass army was numerous, they were ultimately a disorganized mob. Many soldiers had joined merely to fill their stomachs. Hearing that the imperial troops had combined to encircle them, the grass army's morale plummeted. When the fighting actually began, their resolve evaporated. They broke apart almost without resistance, shattering like glass at a touch. The imperial coalition won this first battle, offering the court an excellent opportunity. Had they pursued the rebels then, perhaps the rebellion would have been easy to quell. But Song Wei did not intend to continue the fight. Instead, he busied himself drafting triumphant reports, exaggerating his merits and sending them to the young emperor. In these reports, Song Wei greatly magnified the grass army's ferocity and his own heroism, even fabricating that he had personally slain the rebel leader Wang Xianzi beneath his horse. The young emperor, delighted upon reading this, believed the rebellion decisively crushed. He immediately rewarded Song Wei and allowed the imperial coalition to return to their garrisons to rest. The soldiers rejoiced, thinking they could finally relax. But although the grass army scattered quickly, they regrouped just as swiftly. For these starving people, following Wang Xianzi and Huang Chao in rebellion was the only way to find their next meal. Thus, Wang Xianzi and Huang Chao rapidly reassembled their defeated army, restored their fighting strength in a short time, and resumed plundering the surrounding regions. When word spread that the grass army was once again surging forth, the Tang soldiers who had expected leave at home fell into utter despair, their resentment boiling over. Worse still, they learned that Wang Xianzi had not been killed at all, and Song Wei's battle report had been a lie. From that moment, discontent among the regional armies deepened into anger and discouragement. Many even mutinied outright, openly rebelling. Confronted with this situation, Song Wei himself lost all resolve. He told the court, "Let whoever wishes go suppress them," then withdrew to Bozhou, folded his arms, and watched, allowing the grass army to continue its rampage. Wang Xianzi and Huang Chao could scarcely believe their fortune. Though previously defeated, the Tang forces had collapsed with astonishing speed and lost all will to fight. In these circumstances, the Grass Army reversed its fortunes, achieving victory after victory. They swept through and captured Yangzhou, Jiacheng, Ruzhou, Yangwu, Yingzhou, Fuzhou, and even struck at Zhengzhou, Tangzhou, and Denzhou. Though they once failed in their assault on Zhongzhou at Zhongmu, overall they advanced like splitting bamboo, suffering no major defeats. At Nuzhou, Wang Xianji and Huang Chao also captured Nuzhou's governor, Wang Liao. The reason for seizing Wang Liao was that his elder brother was the current Grand Chancellor. That identity made Wang Liao an important bargaining chip. At that time, the forces of Wang Xianzi and Huang Chao were at their peak, and at this rate, the loss of the Jianghuai region was only a matter of time. The court was deeply shaken upon hearing the news, for Jianghuai was of utmost importance to the Tang. All the empire's provisions come from Jianghuai. It was the treasury of the dynasty. Losing Jianghuai would make it impossible for officials to maintain their extravagant lifestyles. Just then, the court received unexpected good news. The rebel leader, Wang Xianzi, expressed willingness to surrender, seeking only to be granted an official post. This message was brought by Bu Wang, the governor of Chuzhou. The story was as follows. One day, when Wang Xianzi and Huang Chao led their troops to attack Chuzhou, Bu Wang received a letter from the rebel camp. The letter said that his teacher, Wang Liao, had been captured, and if he had any sense, he should open the gates and surrender. Out of loyalty to his teacher, Bu Wang opened the gates to welcome them, offered generous hospitality and precious gifts, which won Wang Xianji's goodwill. Seizing the moment, Bu Wang persuaded him to submit to the court, promising to petition for official ranks for the entire army. Wang Xianzi, having come from a family of salt smugglers, harbored no grand ambitions. In the past, he had been hunted by government troops for smuggling and had long yearned for official recognition. Seeing the opportunity, he agreed. The young emperor hurriedly summoned his chancellors for discussion. Two of them vehemently opposed, reminding the court of the Pangsun rebellion in the past. Though Pangsun had 200,000 troops, Emperor Yizong had not spared him, and now Wang Xianzi was but a minor bandit. Pardoning him would be no different from fostering rebellion. But Grand Chancellor Wang Duo strongly advocated accepting the surrender, for Wang Liao, the captive, was his own brother. After heated debate, the court decided to appoint Wang Xianji as assistant commander of the Left Divine Strategy Army, Zuo Shenchen Fuishi, and supervising censor. The title, Assistant Commander of the Left Divine Strategy Army, sounded grand, but in reality was merely the leader of a small unit guarding the capital. The supervising censor post was a minor office, even lower than a county magistrate, yet Wang Xianzi was overjoyed. Wang Liao and Bu Wang came to congratulate him, calling him General Wang and jokingly referring to him as Little Wang. In contrast, Huang Chao was not pleased. He read the appointment document repeatedly and confirmed that his own name was absent. Having failed in the imperial examinations and now being denied even a rebel's plea for an official post, was the Tang dynasty deliberately slighting him? Rage erupted. Huang Chao punched Wang Xianzi in the face and demanded, "We once swore to sweep across the world, and now you go to Chang'an to be a mere squad leader. What of your brothers?" Huang Chao's anger ignited discontent among the troops, and many accused Wang Xianji of disloyalty. Wang Xianzi hurried to reassure them, saying he would resign his post, but it was too late. Huang Chao gathered over 3,000 troops, left the camp, and declared himself independent from then on. Afterward, Chancellor Lu Hui proposed sending Gao Pian, the military governor of Sichuan, to suppress him. Gao Pian came from the illustrious Bohai Gao clan, a descendant of the famous general Gao Chongwen. His lifetime achievements were remarkable. He had pacified the Dangshang, resisted Tubo, and fought Nanzhao. If not for some bizarre behavior later in life, his name would surely have ranked among the great generals. Seeing Lu Hui recommend a kinsman, Chancellor Wang Duo refused to yield and nominated himself instead, saying, Now that the rebels are rampant, as Grand Chancellor I cannot sit idle. I am willing to personally campaign to relieve His Majesty's worries." Emperor Xizong, hearing them both, gladly decided both would march. Gao Pian was appointed military governor of Zhenhai and sent to Runzhou to deploy forces. A few months later, Wang Duo was made military governor of Xinan, concurrently commander-in-chief of the Southern Expeditionary Army, and led his troops to Jiangling. As for Gao Pian, upon arriving at Runzhou, he launched a fierce offensive against Huang Chao, sending the brave general Zhang Lin to repeatedly defeat him. Huang Chao suffered heavy losses and was forced to retreat westward, crossing 700 li of mountains to withdraw into Fujian. But at the height of his momentum, Gao Pian halted his pursuit, waiting for the court to express its stance and hoping for promotion and rewards. During his hesitation, Huang Chao caught his breath, quickly reorganized, and rose again. Not long after, in Fujian, Huang Chao plundered and stockpiled supplies, restoring his strength. In the 12th lunar month, he captured the capital of Fuzhou, and his forces swelled to 200,000. He then advanced on Guangzhou. Outside Guangzhou's walls, he decided to make another attempt at official recognition, sending a letter through Tang official Zheidong Surveillance Commissioner and Lingnan Eastern Circuit Military Governor, requesting to be appointed military governor of Tianping. When Emperor Xizong heard this, he immediately convened his ministers for urgent deliberation. Chancellor Liu Hui, wishing to secure credit for Gao Pian, opposed the request, saying Huang Chao was insignificant and Gao Pian could handle him. But Chancellor Zheng Tian held a different view, arguing that the request should be granted. He said, "Most of Huang Chao's troops are starving peasants. Once the harvest is abundant and food is plentiful, they will naturally disperse. Victory will be won without a fight." Both sides argued fiercely. But because Gao Pian had previously won victories and Liu Hui's prestige at court had risen, most officials supported his view. They all declared in unison that the Tianping military governorship covered a vast region and that the administration of Tanzhou Prefecture was crucial. It could never be allowed to fall into rebel hands. They would not consent to Huang Chao's request. Hearing the court's refusal, Huang Chao offered a compromise. "Then at least grant me the post of military governor of Guangzhou." Yet the ministers again opposed him. Guangzhou was a vital port, bustling with merchant ships and brimming with wealth. How could rebels be permitted to seize it? Thus, they pinned their hopes on Gao Pian to continue the suppression. At that moment, Zheng Tian could no longer restrain himself. He angrily shouted, "Gao Pian, do you still not understand? He has no intention of suppressing the rebels. He is raising the enemy to increase his own power. Now Huang Chao commands troops in the millions. If you stubbornly follow your strategy, clashing head-on with him, the fate of the Tang dynasty will be unimaginable." Hearing Zheng Tian's public accusation, Liu Yan was enraged, snatched up an inkstone, and hurled it at Zheng Tian. In the Tang imperial court, two chancellors fought openly before all. Emperor Tang Xizong, unable to endure the spectacle, ordered both temporarily dismissed and sent to the eastern capital Luoyang for a period of rest. Though the two chancellors were removed, the court continued debating. The official Lu proposed a new plan. "Let us appoint Huang Chao as Suifu Lu, responsible for security at the Eastern Palace, the ceremonial guards and patrol duties. The position is idle but provides an official carriage perhaps that will placate him." But when Huang Chao received the appointment as Suifu Lu, he erupted in fury. At that time he was besieging Guangzhou and his anger flared. He immediately gave the order to assault the city. "If you will not give it to me, then I will seize it myself." Within a single day, Guangzhou fell. Having taken Guangzhou, Huang Chao immediately realized that using force to seize power was easier than begging for it. He boldly marched in, proclaiming, "I am the king of Guangzhou." A new thought flashed in his mind. If he could take Chang'an, then he would be king of all under heaven. Huang Chao's ambitions swelled to the extreme. From here, he officially began a large-scale northern campaign. Huang Chao was not merely a brutish warrior. Before raising his troops, he issued a proclamation condemning the Tang court for its corruption and its decayed institutions. In this manifesto, Huang Chao clearly expressed his political stance: recommend the worthy, punish the corrupt officials, and if a county magistrate embezzles, exterminate his entire family. Thus, the uprising wore the cloak of righteous justice. The banner he raised was not for personal gain, but for the suffering people of the realm. The masses responded enthusiastically, and Huang Chao formally launched his army. He advanced directly to Guizhou, then, like a great flood, moved through Hangzhou and Yongzhou, and finally reached the strategic city of Tanzhou. Defending Tanzhou at the time was Li Ji, a descendant of the famous mid-Tang general Li Shang. His ancestors had performed great deeds, and among his kin was Li Su, who had guarded Taizhou. Though it was unclear which branch Li Ji belonged to, he had inherited some martial talent. At first, Li Ji kept the gates closed and did not engage. But when Huang Chao breached the gates, Li Ji mounted his horse, charged out through blood and steel, and escaped, abandoning all the soldiers in the city to be massacred by Huang Chao. The corpses were thrown into the river, blocking its flow, and the townspeople were so terrified that they dared not drink the water. At this point, Huang Chao claimed his army numbered 500,000 and continued advancing toward Jiangling. Confronted by such a powerful force, Chancellor Wang Duo, who often claimed to share the emperor's burdens, lost his nerve. He told his subordinate Liu Hanhong, "I give you 3,000 troops, you must block Huang Chao's 500,000. I will go to Xiangyang to join the Shannan East Circuit Governor Liu Zhurong to resist the enemy together." But Liu Hanhong lacked confidence. After receiving the order, he plundered Jiangling and then fled. Jiangling fell to Huang Chao. Huang Chao then marched north to attack Xiangyang. On the march, his army encountered the Tang vanguard led by Cao Quanchang. Seeing Huang Chao's massive forces, Cao Quanchang turned and fled. Suspecting a trap, Huang Chao ordered a full pursuit. Unaware, he had fallen into an ambush. Just as Huang Chao's forces were hot in pursuit, Liu Zhurong of the Shannan East Circuit launched a surprise flank attack, while Cao Quancheng wheeled around to strike from the front. Huang Chao's army was attacked from two sides. Though numerous, they lacked battlefield experience and quickly collapsed. The casualties were immense. 7 or 8 out of every 10 were killed or captured. The man who orchestrated this ambush was Liu Zhurong, the same man Wang Duo had claimed would cooperate against the rebels. But throughout the campaign, Wang Duo himself was nowhere to be seen. After this crushing defeat, Huang Chao led his battered remnants back to Jiangling, crossed the Yangtze River, and fled eastward. Like Gao Pian before him, Liu Zhurong did not pursue. When his subordinates questioned him, he candidly replied, "The court has never been trustworthy. If we truly eliminate the rebels, where will future opportunities for merit and rewards come from? Leaving them alive ensures our interests and keeps the court cautious." By this logic, allowing the rebels to survive was a way to preserve advantage. Thanks to this, Huang Chao had a reprieve. He gathered his scattered troops, raised his banner once again, and campaigned anew. He led his army through Ezhou, Raozhou, Xinzhou, Chuzhou, Shaochou, Xiaochou, and Hangzhou, growing his forces once more to 200,000. At this point, Emperor Tang Xizong searched everywhere for aid and finally pinned his hopes on Gao Pian, the man who had once defeated Huang Chao. Chancellor Liu Yan pleaded earnestly with the emperor, urging him to quickly appoint Gao Pian as supreme commander of the suppression forces to take charge of the entire situation. Gao Pian, elated with success, formally assumed the role of commander-in-chief of the expeditionary forces of all circuits, gathering troops from across the realm, recruiting 70,000 elite soldiers, and dispatching the great general Zhang Lin to prepare a full-scale counterattack. But Huang Chao humbled himself and offered surrender. He sent much gold to Zhang Lin to buy time and wrote to Gao Pian, expressing submission. "As long as the court grants me a military governorship, I will immediately halt my army and return to serve the dynasty. Gao Pian had already resolved not to give Huang Chao such a chance. He planned to feign acceptance, wait for Huang Chao to let down his guard, and then crush him. But before the campaign began, Gao Pian submitted a memorial to the court, boasting that he had already inflicted a devastating defeat on Huang Chao and recommending that no further reinforcements be sent. The memorial was not intended to save military funds, but to monopolize credit and prevent others from sharing in the glory. He hoped to quell the rebellion alone and thereby seize power and prestige. Emperor Xizong read the memorial with joy, convinced that Gao Pian was indeed a pillar of the dynasty. He immediately ordered the allied forces of all circuits disbanded and returned to their garrisons, waiting confidently for news of victory. But once the allied forces had withdrawn, Huang Chao immediately reneged, declaring he would not surrender, flashing his familiar sly grin. This betrayal nearly drove Gao Pian mad. He urgently ordered General Zhang Lin to launch the full offensive. But Huang Chao had already anticipated this moment, ready for battle, waiting only for Gao Pian's impatience to strip away his composure. In a fury, having lost all reason, Zhang Lin rashly advanced, only to fall into Huang Chao's ambush. He was ultimately killed in battle. The Tang forces suffered a crushing defeat, and Huang Chao seized the opportunity to capture Muzhou and Xuanzhou, then crossed the Yangtze River at Taishi, heading directly for Tianchang and Liuhe. Wherever he marched, his military might was awe-inspiring, his momentum overwhelming, and none dared oppose him. In contrast, Gao Pian awoke from his dream of initial victory to harsh reality. Confronted with a disastrous defeat, he lost all confidence in fighting, decisively ordering the army to fortify its defenses and refusing further engagement. He sent a helpless memorial to the court, stating that Huang Chao now commanded 600,000 troops while he himself was incapacitated by illness and unable to meet the enemy outside the city. The message implied that the court must now find its own way to deal with this unprecedented crisis. At the same time, Chancellor Liu Hui also cited illness to request leave, avoiding court sessions altogether. The central authority of the Great Tang seemed paralyzed, and the political situation grew ever more chaotic. Seizing the opportunity, Huang Chao pressed his attack, successively capturing Yingzhou, Songzhou, Shuzhou, and Yuanzhou with unstoppable momentum. He not only expanded his territory, but also sent letters to every Tang garrison warning, "Do not interfere. I am marching on the capital to hold the court accountable. This does not concern you." The fatal blow came in 878. Under Li Keong, the Chateau troops mutinied and killed the Tang official Duan Wensuo. The court was forced to redeploy elite troops from Yicheng, Zhongwu, Zhaoyi, and Heiyang to suppress the Chateau uprising. This redeployment left the defenses east of Tong Pass nearly empty, granting Huang Chao his opening. He easily broke through Luoyang's defensive line, advancing like a storm, meeting almost no serious resistance. News that Huang Chao was approaching the eastern capital spread quickly. The young emperor, anxious in the Yuanyin Hall, hastily asked his ministers, "What should we do now? Should we grant Huang Chao a military governorship?" The ministers scrambled to agree, suggesting that granting him the post of military governor of Tianping might stabilize the situation. But was it already too late? Huang Chao received this gift, sneered contemptuously, and thought to himself, "A military governorship? I want to be emperor." He then ordered his entire army to march swiftly on Chang'an. As they neared Tongguan, the young emperor broke into tears. "What should we do now?" The chief eunuch, Tian Lingzi, solemnly swore, "Your Majesty should personally command the Divine Strategy Army to confront the enemy at Tongguan." But everyone knew the Divine Strategy Army was weak, mostly sons of officials seeking titles, untrained and unwilling. Some were busy with pleasure, others had only their names on the roster. When ordered to the battlefield, these young men clung to their fathers and wept. Their fathers, pitying them, paid to send sick men as substitutes. The strength of such an army was easy to imagine. The commander of this ragtag force was Divine Strategy Army General Zhang Chengfan. As they set out, he lamented to Emperor Zizong, "Your Majesty orders me to meet the enemy outside the city, yet not a single grain of rations is provided. I am truly worried." Zizong reassured him, "Do not worry, the provisions will arrive soon." But when Zhang Chengfan reached Tongguan, no supplies had come. When Huang Chao's main army arrived, the starving defenders, dizzy with hunger, abandoned their posts en masse. Even so, a few brave warriors swore to fight to the death, facing an enemy tens of thousands of times their number. Outside Tong Pass, a deep moat briefly slowed Huang Chao's advance. The defenders fired arrows until they ran out, then hurled stones. To fill the moat, Huang Chao forced civilians to charge forward, using their bodies as stepping stones. Eventually, his great army flooded across, setting fire to the gate towers. Zhang Chengfan, left with no choice, retreated to Weiqiao, where he met Tian Lingzi leading reinforcements. But these reinforcements were impeccably dressed and gleaming, while Zhang's soldiers were ragged and filthy. Seeing his battle-worn brothers compared to the resplendent reinforcements, Zhang Chengfan seethed, "We risk our lives on the front lines, starving, while you useless ones feast and dress in finery." Enraged, he ordered the confiscation of the reinforcements' fine garments, then turned his troops around, marched straight to Huang Chao's main camp, and surrendered, becoming the very guide who led the rebels into Chang'an. At that time, Chang'an was an apocalyptic scene. As for the emperor, under the guidance of the eunuch Tian Lingzi, the young sovereign quietly fled through the Jingguang Gate, not forgetting to bring along several favored consorts. But the vast empire and its countless subjects, he abandoned them all. Chancellor Lu Hui, the man who had once recommended Gao Pian as supreme commander to suppress the rebels, now sat in shame at home, drank poisoned wine, and ended his life. Hearing that the emperor had fled, soldiers and civilians stormed the storehouses and looted them. Civil and military officials gathered at the docks, preparing to welcome Huang Chao's grand army. The Tang dynasty, brought to such a state, truly provoked sorrowful sighs. The emperor fled for his life, the chancellors schemed for power, and officials who had long enjoyed imperial stipends now scrambled to surrender to the rebels or seek their favor. How could Huang Chao not triumph? Outside the eastern walls of Chang'an, on the broad avenue, Huang Chao's white banners covered the sky, fluttering like great waves. From within those waves blossomed a golden flower, a golden palanquin borne by 8 strong men. Inside sat a figure clad in dragon-scale golden armor and wearing a phoenix-winged golden helmet. He looked down at the officials and commoners prostrated on either side of the road, his eyes brimming with unrestrained pride that terrified all who met his gaze. None dared oppose him. Later, when Tang was founded, Li Kunxiao became a man who, if a god blocked him, he killed the god. If a Buddha blocked him, he killed the Buddha. Shaking the world by himself, just how formidable was Li Kunxiao? Could he compare to Xiang Yu? Tracing back his origins, his original name was An Jingxi. He was born in a village in Deju. Local legend said that the stone at the village entrance was a fallen star, and whoever was favored by the stone general would find great fortune. One day, a maiden surnamed He crossed the stone bridge and tossed her basket of flowers. By chance, it slipped perfectly over the neck of the stone general. Returning home, she was astonished to discover she was with child. In those times, being pregnant without marriage was despised. Lady He pleaded in vain and could only give birth. Because of her status, her relatives shunned her, leaving mother and son to rely on one another. When the boy was 4, she led him before the stone statue and told him to bow to his father. Learning that his father was a rock, the boy grew angry and struck the statue with his fist, shattering it. Lady He, shocked and furious, knelt to pray for forgiveness, then gathered the broken pieces and named her son Anjingxi, meaning Anjingxi, hoping he would remember. At 10 years old, while herding goats on a hillside, and Jingxi suddenly encountered a ferocious tiger, yet even facing the fierce beast, he showed no fear, for he was born with divine strength. Though the tiger was considered the mightiest of beasts among men, he did not even regard it seriously, and with bare hands, he struck down the living tiger. At that moment, across the ravine, a man was passing. It was the Sword King Li Qiong. From a distance, Li Qiong saw the boy, so young yet able to kill a tiger, and felt deep admiration. He deliberately called out, "Whose child dares to slay the tiger I raised?" And Jingxi was not angered. Looking at Li Qiong, he replied, "So this tiger belongs to you. I was wrong to kill your tiger. Then I shall return it to you." Crossing the ravine, he tossed the tiger as easily as a stone, and it landed lightly at Li Qiong's feet. Li Qiong was impressed and kept the boy in mind. After inquiring everywhere, he learned the child belonged to Lady He's household. He grew fond of him and offered to adopt him. From then on, Jingxi changed his name to Li Kunxiao. He followed Li Qiong through countless battles, becoming his most trusted right-hand man, known as one of the 13 Taibao. Li Kunxiao, among Li Qiong's 13 adopted sons, was the bravest and most skilled in battle, earning great military merit. Among the 13 Taibao, he was foremost, his combat power famed as 1 man equals 10,000. Whenever he accompanied Li Qiong in campaigns north and south, wherever Li Kunxiao was present, victory was assured. Clad in armor and armed with a bow, each time he charged, he was invincible. His ferocity made even Di Junwen blanch. The generals of later Liang, upon hearing Li Kunxiao was marching, dared not face him and withdrew their troops. When attacking Jinzhou, the city's gates were shut tight, and they did not dare to sally forth. When besieging Xiazhou, the defending official fled upon hearing his name, granting him victory without a fight. Li Kunxiao's fame resounded across the realm. At the same time, there were talents such as Gao Shiji, ancestor of the Yang family, yet, compared with Li Kunxiao, they seemed dim, lamenting that they were born at the wrong time. Wang Yanzhang was the foremost fierce general of later Liang, nicknamed the Iron Spear King, a strength unmatched by 10,000 men. He once challenged 36 of Li Qiong's famous generals, but when he met Li Kunxiao, he could not withstand even 2 bouts. On another occasion, at Xuchang County by a muddy riverbank, Wang Yanzhang, wielding a 120 jin iron spear, blocked the road to plunder and came face to face with Li Kunxiao. He swung his spear down at his opponent's head, but Li Kunxiao caught it bare-handed. Wang Yanzhang pulled with all his strength, but the spear did not budge. With a slight flick of his hand, Li Kunxiao hurled him more than 100 paces, sending him crashing straight into the muddy river. Wang Yanzhang struggled to climb back up, unwilling to accept defeat, and once more mounted his horse, brandishing his spear. But Li Kunxiao swung his arm down, bending the iron spear into a perfect circle like a metal hoop, shaming him into tears. He said, "If Li Kunxiao does not die within 10 years, then I will not appear for 10 years. Only when he is dead will I re-emerge." Indeed, after Li Kunxiao's death, Wang Yanzhang returned, repeatedly challenging 36 of Li Qiong's generals, forcing Li Qiong to lament, "If Kunxiao was still alive, how could it be your turn to run rampant?" Later, through a strategist scheme, a man was sent to impersonate Li Kunxiao in battle. As soon as Wang Yanzhang saw him, he panicked and fled, even frightening his own younger brother, Wang Yantong, nearly to death. Across 5,000 years of Huaxia's history, countless national heroes have arisen, yet none could match Li Kunxiao, who, with only 18 cavalrymen, captured heavily fortified Chang'an. The title, the greatest warrior of the ages, is no exaggeration. Yet even heroes cannot escape the treachery of petty men. Li Kunxiao was deeply cherished by Li Qiong, which aroused envy among many, none more bitter than Li Kunxin, Li Qiong's 4th son. Before Li Kunxiao's arrival, Li Kunxin had been the most beloved, but as Li Kunxiao's victories multiplied, Confucian's standing declined. His jealousy burned, and he plotted to drive a wedge between father and foster son. He approached Li Kunxiao with honeyed words, "You are only an adopted son. Why risk your life for your foster father? Though Li Qiong is your adoptive father, sooner or later he will cast you aside. As the saying goes, when the hare dies, the hunting dog is slaughtered. When the birds are gone, the bow is stored away. On the day the world is pacified, you will be eliminated. Better to establish your own power, reclaim your true name and Jingxi, and you will surely carve out a hegemonic legacy. As your elder brother, I will secretly help you succeed." While flattering him, Li Kunxian simultaneously slandered him before Li Qiong, claiming that Li Kunxiao harbored treacherous intent. He even forged letters, fabricating evidence that Li Kunxiao was secretly colluding with Zhu Quanzhong. Using his influence, he cut off Li Kunxiao's military provisions. Gradually, Li Kunxiao believed that his foster father suspected him. Young and naive, remembering Kunxian's persuasive words, he restored his real name and Jingxi and raised troops in rebellion. But unexpectedly, the first to suppress him was his own brother Li Kunjian. Facing his former comrades, Kunxiao's resolve faltered. Lacking the true heart for rebellion, he was quickly defeated, captured, and brought before Li Qiong. With full evidence presented, Li Kunxiao finally realized it had all been Kunxian's scheme. Yet, treason was a capital crime. Though Li Qiong could not bear it, he was compelled to execute him. The punishment was dismemberment by 5 horses, with the reins held by none other than his sworn brother, Li Kunjian. But Li Kunxiao's natural strength prevented the 5 horses from tearing him apart. He strained against them, causing multiple failed attempts. Calmly, he said, "In this world, it seems I alone cannot be torn apart by 5 horses." Yet he had no intention of escaping. He told Kunxian, "Remove the knot from my head and I will die at once." Even at the brink of death, Li Kunxiao worried for his elder brother, fearing he would be punished for failing, and so willingly ended his own life. The 5 horses surged forward together, and a great general of the ages fell. According to the Taiwan County Gazetteer, Li Kunxiao's tomb is at Fengyu Pass, now within Jinyuan District, Taiyuan. The mountain there resembles a crown prince, so it is called Tai Mountain. Outraged at his death, yet in awe of his strength, the local people revered him as a mountain deity and built a temple in his honor. Even grave robbers dared not desecrate his resting place. Among the folk, a custom arose to cut out his likeness as paper window flowers and paste them up to guard households and ward off evil. A mighty hero in the end was torn apart because he heeded the words of the petty Li Kunxian. The death of this peerless warrior of the ages also marked the decline of Li Qiong's glorious days, signaling that the realm would soon belong to another.